So yes, once again, I find myself with the cold starting issue. I'm just getting absolutely nothing. And to top that, the last few journeys I've had on a straight run, I've had an intermittent, loss of power, engine cuts out. As soon as you start it again, it's absolutely clear. So looks like I am back to fault finding an intermittent fault once again. So I had replaced the fuel filter and the fuel pump in the 308 a few years ago because I was having similar issues, and I thought that was the remedy. Quite clearly it wasn't. Just patched over the cracks. So I've ordered a new fuel filter, so I'm going to check that anyway, just in case there's some sort of blockage. I mean, it could be that I've run the tanks low and it's just picked up some crap from the bottom, and it's just sitting in the filter, just every so often just popping into the wrong place and then causing this cutout. But while I'm down there, I thought I might as well put in the old pump as well. So this is the old pump. I've stripped it right down, and I've put power to it. It works. It obviously needs a good clean up, but I might as well put the original back in place. And these were not silent by any means, but they were a lot quieter than the one that I've got in there now. But before we do that, I'm going to stick my spark plug testers on the rear bank just to make sure that we have actually got power going to the plugs. It might not have been that clear to you because of the angle of the camera, but there was definitely a spark there. So I'm happy that I am getting spark down in the cylinder. So I'm really going to start now looking at the fueling. So I've cleaned up all of the plugs with some carburetor cleaner. So I've checked the first one, and then just randomly I'm going to check plug number 4 and see if we get a spark there. Okay, so I've checked the spark plugs on that rear bank. I haven't done the front bank. To be honest, it's a bit of a pig to get into, but by checking this and knowing that there's spark along the back here means that I can tick off that the leads and the spark plugs are okay, I think, before messing around with the plugs on that front bank. So the next thing I'm going to do is take off the air box and then have a look at the fuel pipes and see if fuel is going around. The system on here, we've got a tank on either side. There's a breather pipe that goes between them and a larger pipe that sits so the level of the tanks is equal at all times. There's a pump and a filter that's located down the bottom here. As I said, I'm going to try and clean up and refit the original pump because I think it's working fine, but I've got a filter on order, so I'm waiting for that. And then the system comes up and goes around the carburetors and then feeds back into the fuel tank. So I should be getting a constant movement whether the car is running or not when the ignition is on. So that's the next thing to check. So with the airbox off now, we can see the fuel pipe system a little easier. So coming in from the back, this is coming from the fuel pump and fuel filter, running through, picking up this carburetor, then this one, then coming round, feeding this one, feeding that one, and then going back into the right hand tank. So continuous system, and it's just whatever's not picked up by the carburetors then goes into the tank, and again just full circle. So when the pump's running, it should be flowing continuously. So I'm going to take one of these off and just see, have we got fuel flow. Okay, let's pop the ignition on, and we'll hear the fuel pump kicking in and see what comes out. Absolutely nothing. There you go. Obviously no fuel getting through. That's quite obviously the issue there. I mean, these cars are quite simple creatures, just like myself. They just need the fuel and the spark, and obviously we're getting the spark, but we're not getting the fuel. So the next job is just to get it up in the air. Let's get that old pump off and see whether that is actually pumping. We'll get the fuel filter out as well and see if that's got any kind of blockage in it. And as luck would have it, the new fuel filter has just turned up today, so yeah, nice and shiny. So we'll compare that against the one that's in the car. Now, oddly, as I just stopped recording there, some fuel kind of dribbled out. So I've just started it again, and actually the fuel is coming out quite fast. So whether it was empty and it took a while to come through, or maybe there's a problem elsewhere. So I'll just fire it up again, or turn it on again, and you'll see that it's coming out quite reasonable flow. So there's nothing there at the moment, It takes a while. You know, it's still not a massive amount, but you know, there is fuel coming out. There is fuel coming out of there. Okay, so I've reconnected the fuel line, and obviously the fuel was coming through. So I'm going to switch it back on again, allow the pump time to circulate, as it did seem to take a little while, and let's see if it fires up. If it does, then the only thing I can think of is a air lock in the fuel system. I will still go through all of the pipes just to make sure there's nothing degrading in there. But the only places I can think where the air admittance is at the fuel tank, and I did try it before with the cap off, and that didn't make a difference. So let's have a look, let's give it a go and see if it catches at all. So by my reckoning, the fuel must be pumping its way around based on the trial just now. So let's give it a go. Well, obviously that's not running right, but it caught, which is more than it has been doing. So there must have been something going on with that fuel, because until I loosened that off and tried that, I was getting nothing. It wasn't catching at all. So there must be something along that fuel feed line. Now, it sounded as though only half the banks were firing at that point. So I will go through the front bank and just check all of those plugs as well. Then I think it's then time to run through the fuel system. So I've just pulled out the first plug on that front bank, and that is looking very, very gunked up. That's very black. The rear bank did have some brownie deposits on it, but that's looking very black indeed. So I'd say that's not running, well, that would indicate it's running rich, but it's a bit oily as well. But while we're in here, I just want to show you that the space I've got to work with. I've got the lid open. Now a garage would obviously normally take the lid off, but because I'm working on my own, I can't do that. So I'm literally working in the gap with the lid open between the rear screen and the bottom of the lid, which is a little bit on the tight side. I'll show you if we come in this way. So there's the plug points there, and the plug's sitting here. Now this is the tool I need to get down to the plug. I can't fit a normal plug socket in this opening here. But I've then got to try and get this in, which is not always straightforward, and then that slides all the way in down to the plug, and then I can get a socket on it. But it's all very tight when you're working on your own. I've been through the front bank now. I've cleaned up all of those particularly sooty plugs, checked all the gaps, which all seemed fine. I've put the spark light on all the leads as well, and getting a good full array of illumination there, so that seems to be fine. But the colouring of the plugs does indicate that perhaps there's something not quite right with the fueling. Behind me, I am in the process of rebuilding the original fuel pump as well, so we'll get that back together again and give that a test. Meanwhile, I'm going to start stripping down the fuel lines and just check one by one if there's any kind of breaking down inside of those rubber pipes. You know, they could break down through old age, or potentially I've used some E10 fuel. I don't do that here. I'm quite particular about where I fill up, but obviously I have done quite a few miles abroad in the past, so it could be a factor. So to get access to the pump and the filter, we've got to go in to the rear, just behind the rear wheel well, and underneath here we've got the housing for the filter and then the pump that I replaced a few years ago. Now we've got the tank. This is the bottom of the fuel tank here, and we've got a pipe coming out, and I don't know if you can see, but that has actually got a kink in it, which would be restricting fuel flow on that, so that could be an issue. From here it goes up to the top of the filter housing, and then out the other side into the pump, and then from the top of the pump goes off and up to the carburetors. So I'm going to start by clamping this pipe off, and then we can start removing this. So that's the fuel filter now out of the car. So let's open it up and just have a look at what the condition of the filter is. When you look at that, and it just looks brand new, doesn't it? Even the paper element, or whatever it is that's running inside, just looks really clean. So I don't think that is my problem. So just to give myself a bit more access, I have removed the inner wheel arch, and I've never done that before, but it was quite simple and actually has given me a lot more access around. Now, obviously the fuel pump and filter are going to go back on there. I'm going to replace this fuel hose here. It doesn't look that old, but it's a bit short, and then there was that kink in it as well. This one, I think, is the breather pipe that goes up to the fillet element at the top, and I think this one is the overflow. Up here we've got just an outlet, so where the fillet neck is, just in case there's any liquid water gets in there, rather than pooling in around here, it just drains down, and then that is this pipe here. Probably should be a little bit longer, but I'm going to leave that for the time being. So that's the fuel pump now reassembled. I've given all the components inside a good clean, and given the outside a bit of a spruce up as well. The only thing I had to replace was the cable, because it had a bit of a cut in it right as it joins in here as well. But it looks pretty much as it did before, just a bit cleaner. So I'm just going to hook it up to the battery again and just make sure that it is still working. Just for a sound comparison, I'm going to hook up that replacement one that was fitted a few years ago. Sounds like a drill in comparison. Okay, so I've given the fuel filter housing a bit of a spruce up so we can get that back in the car. Now, I've been doing a little bit more research into the spark plugs as well, and I didn't realise that the number represents the sort of thermal protection or heat resistance of the plug. So, for example, a higher number, a brake, for example, would be running cooler based on the fact that an engine would be running hotter for faster for longer, and therefore there's more thermal resistance, whereas a lower number has less thermal resistance, so the plug runs slightly hotter, so therefore would suit an engine that is running cooler, and perhaps for the shorter journeys. Now, although the 7s are recommended and have done me fine for the majority of the ownership, historically I have been doing longer, faster runs in the car, whereas more recently they have been more local, shorter journeys, and perhaps the car isn't getting as warm. So that might be the reason why they're clogging up, because they are running too cool. The other thing is I've been running the gap slightly smaller than the recommendation at 0.22. So I have bought a full set of new plugs. The recommended number is 7. I've heard of people running number 5s on the 308s, the older 308s, but I'm going to go with a 6, and I'm going to gap it as per the recommendations. And I think that may overcome my cold start issue. So we'll get these into the car and let's see if that works. I have removed the breather hose from the filler neck through to the breather hose connection that joins the two tanks together. And it's quite clear that there is a pinch in the pipe where it was wrapped around the filler overflow pipe. Just purely because I think it was just slightly too short. So I've ordered some more pipe. This one is marked with Cavis Benz. Cavis, I think, is the manufacturer of the pipe. Benz, I think, is bentonite, I think, like for the fuel. Can't get hold of this, but I'm just going to use some clear fuel pipe that will be E5 and E10 compatible. But maybe, just maybe, this is the reason for the intermittent fault. It could just be an airlock where this is pinching. Maybe. Time will tell. So I've just rigged up a temporary fuel supply here so we can test that pump, and let's just see how it flows up at the top. I tell you, I cannot believe how much fuel was flowing through that pipe there. What a difference. The pump is much quieter than that replacement one was in there, but I mean, the fuel flow was just incredible, and in no time at all, it's near enough filled that jar. So I'm really pleased with that. So I think that's all we've got time for in this video, and what a place to finish on a real high there. Just seeing that fuel delivery vastly improved on what it was. There's still a number of checks to perform and get it out for a test drive, which we'll do in the next video, and hopefully we'll have cured all of those issues I was experiencing. If you've enjoyed the video, please do like, comment down below. But until next time, thanks very much for watching. Cheerio.